I figure now that I gained a small following out of nowhere that I'll try some video styles out and see what sticks. If you weren't expecting this, comment below. And one thing that I'll make real quick, this will be the last video with this mic quality and I'm sorry about that. Peter the Great was perhaps best known for bringing the Enlightenment along with many Western ideals to Russia, instituting a plethora of reforms, founding the grand city of St. Petersburg, being an alcoholic, sentencing his son to death for treason, having 4 pounds of solidified urine removed from his tortured, abused urinary tract, and most of all, leading a synod of, quote, all-joking, all-drunken fools and jesters. Oh, and he built the Russian Versailles, so overall he was a pretty great guy. Wait, I feel like I just glossed over something interesting. One of those could make great content. Ah yes, get ready for the all-joking, all-drunken Synod of Fools and Jesters, founded by Peter the Great, Emperor of all Russia. Let's give some context here. Much like the hard liquor he enjoyed, Peter's childhood was not very smooth. His father, like most monarchs, put him in the hand of several tutors, funnily enough one of whom would become one of his drinking buddies later on. Then, at the age of 4, Peter's father, Tsar Alexis, passed away from a heart attack. Peter's sickly brother would succeed him, but the strings were pulled by one of Tsar Alexis's old friends, Artemon Matveyev. His reign would last only 6 years, and he would meet his untimely end, heirless, at the hands of scurvy. After yet another death in the family, the Boyar Duma, a council of Russian nobles, was forced to break apart the subsequent fight for the throne between Alexis's first and second wives over which family should inherit the tsardom. Ivan V should have been next in line, but he was even more unfit to rule as his now deceased older brother was. And so, Peter Romanov, at the age of 10, was chosen for the throne, set to rule with his mother as regent. Sophia, elder sister to Ivan and half-sister to Peter, was rumored to have begged Tsar Alexis not to designate Peter as his heir. Sophia was an ambitious woman. She pleaded to the Boyar Duma that the proclamation of Peter as Tsar was an infringement of monarchical law as Ivan was next in line. Sophia proposed that both she and her brother Ivan should rule jointly instead, vehemently arguing that Ivan was anything but inept and of an infirm mind. The Boyar Duma swiftly and unanimously rejected this proposal, leading her to, as anyone would do in her situation, recruit Russia's elite and previously malcontent Streltsy to start an uprising. Those even vaguely familiar with the name Romanov know the fate of Russia's last Tsar, but he wasn't the only one to witness his family and peers be massacred before him, callously and carelessly. Sophia's Streltsy stormed the Kremlin, lynching leading military commanders and boyars, including Matveyev. Even Moscow's poorest came into the streets to join the looting. In the end, it was decided by force that Peter and Ivan would rule jointly, Ivan as the senior monarch. Of course, the arrangement for Peter's mother to act as regent fell through, and Sophia exerted an autocratic grasp on the tsardom in her place. She had a hole cut in the back of the dual-seated throne so she could listen and advise the young rulers. At 17, Peter was forced by Sophia to enter an arranged traditional marriage as though he were a princess at the mercy of a king. 10 years later, Peter would force his wife to become a nun so that they may split apart. Peter Romanov was not content with this situation. Sophia led 2 campaigns, both of which ending in failure, against the Crimean Khanate, a land that Peter's mother could trace her lineage to. Speaking of his mother, during Sophia's regency, she lived in poverty, surviving on donations from the church. Day by day, every regent's worst fear began to realize itself. Peter began to order that people report to him instead of his half-sister. When Sophia learned that the young Tsar was naturally plotting her removal, she once again returned to the Streltsy. This time, they warned Peter in the deep hours of the night, leading him to immediately abscond with his supporters to a well-fortified monastery. Sophia toyed with the idea of declaring herself Tsarina with the support of the Streltsy, but they denied her request. As you might have guessed, Peter would come out on top in the ensuing power struggle, seeing as he was, of course, the legitimate monarch. He locked his half-sister in a convent, unveiled for the rest of her life. Some years later, she tried to coax the Streltsy into an uprising once more, but it ended with the corpses of the conspirators on stakes outside of her window. I'm already far beyond the scope of the video, but I feel it worth mentioning Peter then, at the age of 17, had to manage this empire, and soon fight against this one. So, I suppose there isn't much mystery as to why this monarch took to liquor and merriment to brighten up the cold, dark Russian winters. And as the Tsar, you simply can't drink with the common folk, no, that would be absolutely horrendous. Peter's solution was to gather up roughly 100 to 200 princes, nobles, commanders, admirals, even his tutor, Nikita Zotov, and other people that would rise to power under his administration later on. Oh, and he certainly couldn't do it on royal dime, lest the media criticize him, so he would take his merry band, known as the Jolly Company, from door to door of random Russian nobles, insisting that they be hosted for a night of revelry, booze, and carousing. I can't imagine it would be easy to say no to the 6'8" Emperor of Russia, toting the most powerful men in the country behind him. This ploy sprang from the Russian version of Christmas caroling, something the royal family was not expected to participate in, yet Peter always took part, even from a young age. The Jolly Company began to slowly transition from an almost nomadic group of carousers to something much more structured and relatively dignified. They began to settle down in Moscow for Americans, Moscow for everyone else, and Moskva for Russians. They typically gathered in the home of Francois Le Fort, in English Francis the Strong, who was the commander in the previously mentioned botched Crimean campaigns. Peter the Great laid the foundations for the Synod, quite literally, as he built a 1,500-man dining hall as an offshoot of Francois' home. One source even claims that it was not just a dining hall, and that Peter, quote, built Le Fort a new house in honor of Bacchus. It's even said that when Peter and Francois were absent, members of the Jolly Company could still be heard slamming shots of vodka and hanging out in the dining hall. The Jolly Company eventually expanded officially into the All-Drunken Synod of Fools and Jesters, which had a Prince-Pope, a college of cardinals, bishops, priests, and deacons. Peter himself was a deacon, despite being the leader of the group, and he often signed letters as Deacon Peter while making commandments, organizing ceremonies, and other rituals, typically involving heavy drinking requirements. The Synod ended up including every person of power in the Russian government, including real clergymen. Titles and nicknames came to play a ceremonial role. One could argue the rigidity and respect of each title given in jest could compare to the respect given to legitimate traditional titles of the clergy and nobility. To quote a paper by Russell Zaguta on the subject, Peter seems to have expended as much energy on the Synod as he did on many of his more serious projects. He was constantly adding to or changing its statutes, drawing up elaborate procedures for the induction of new members, or, as happened after the death of Nikita Zotov in 1717, single-handedly worked out the details for the election and installation of a new Prince-Pope. If the Mafia can be called organized crime, the all-drunken Synod of Fools and Jesters can be called organized mischief. The group partied with recurring libations in the honor of Bacchus. Members' titles began to grow even more ridiculous, as a certain Fyodor was addressed Your Majesty, Peter even presenting him to defeated countries as though he were the true Russian Tsar. The more serious members of the court who were forced into the Synod were granted the title Associate Member as a form of mockery. Frequently, the grand dining hall of Le Fort's home was filled to the brim with the Russian elite partaking in games and events that mostly ended in shots of vodka. But all around, the influence of the Synod was spreading to nearly every official public facet of the Russian government. The faux religious order, despite being much larger now, was basically the society to be in if you were a Bacchus-worshipping partygoer or not. Peter the Great's little drinking club had practically grown into an elite subset of the upper class, granting political power and open doors around Russia to those that managed to join. Some would come to claim the Tsar as the Antichrist for the Synod's apparent contempt for the Church. Peter would take the authority of many religious holidays out of the hands of the Russian Orthodox Patriarch and into the Synod's satirical grasp. The caroling that started this Jolly Company ended up yet another religious tradition turned to a day for pompous drunkards to roam the streets of Moscow. A religious holiday in which the head of the Orthodox Church would ride on a horse, the Tsar at his side with the reins, was replaced with the Synod's Prince-Pope riding through town with his so-called cardinal drunks in a carriage pulled by farm animals. These cardinal drunks were, quote, carefully chosen from among the most physically deformed stutterers that can be found anywhere and outfitted in the traditional garb of their ecclesiastical office. Another time, the Tsar's favorite dwarf, because why wouldn't he have one, passed away, and Peter took this as an opportunity to mock the church's rituals. 24 male dwarves walked the funeral procession hand in hand, and behind them were, quote, she-dwarves arranged according to their several sizes like organ pipes. Among Peter's other mischievous, jester-like activities included planning weddings, even for the Prince Pope Nikita Zotov, with decrepit old men and victims of gout as the bridesmen, stewards, and waiters. And the priest at that wedding? He was, quote, 100 years old, without his eyesight and memory, to supply which defect a pair of spectacles were put on his nose, 2 candles held before his eyes, and the words sounded in his ears, which he was to say aloud. Not to mention, all of this was planned on a whim Peter woke up with, that the 84-year-old widow Prince Pope Nikita Zotov, his old tutor, ought to get married again. Peter was a devout Orthodox Christian, being raised under the Russian throne, so it at first comes as a surprise that he would mock the church so caustically at times. In truth, Peter's issue wasn't religion, but the hierarchy, something that could be said of the vast majority of modern Christians. Peter Romanov was an innovative, forward-thinking man, and his antics preceded an almost worldwide view of religion by 300 years. He pulled these sardonic stunts while famous satirist Voltaire was still young. He did this while leading Russia to war against the Ottoman Empire, founding the Russian Navy, bringing the Western Enlightenment, and transforming Russia into a modern empire. Peter didn't say, go copy the Western ships. He went to personally build ships for the Dutch East India Company. He was born in the Tsardom of Russia and died in the Russian Empire. I couldn't think of a better final resting place for this man than the Saints Peter and Paul Cathedral in his own city, St. Petersburg. I hope this video was along the documentary style that you were expecting from the channel. I wanted to get this out relatively quickly so people know that I'm not dead and that I won't solely be uploading College Board content. I'm not a person who thrives on conflict and disagreement, pugnacious comments really bother me, so I can definitely say don't expect many debate or controversial videos in the future. I would make more debunking bandwagon hate style videos, but it would have to be something I actually care about, like AP exams. It would be a great help if you commented down below what you thought about this video. I hope my last upload showed you I'm a person willing to adapt and change, so I'm open to anything you have to say. I've yet to be contacted by Raid Shadow Legends, so I guess now I should be ending videos solely with something like, subscribe if you want to see more content from me in the future. Thanks for watching.